Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Section 109 podcast from Studio Breezy. I am joined by Matthew, technical director Sebastian, and before we start, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love a like, comment, subscribe, all the normal things that make podcasters happy. I can never get that out right. And if you're watching or listening on a different platform, we would appreciate a review. I don't think we've gotten a review in a long time, so it would make us happy. But as we start this, Matthew, I'm going to let you drive. But we are going to ask a lot of food questions, just so you know. We're more of a food podcast, maybe even sometimes than a soccer podcast.
Yeah, but we're also sometimes a news podcast. So let's pick up quickly with where our last podcast ended, which was we recorded after the Atlanta United friendly. We announced two players. One of them was center back Ethan Dudley. The other player was 10, attacking midfielder Daniel Mangaroff.
We should ask Sebastian about those guys. Sebastian, hello, how are you?
I'm doing super well and excited to be here, so thank you for having me.
Super excited to have you. It's been a long time coming, and
it has.
We love asking way too many questions. Can you tell me anything you would like to share about either of those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had them on trial here, so we got a very good look at them, and to credit to the staff too, during the off season, we probably in detail scouted probably over 350 players.
What is that? Okay, now I got to get inside baseball. What does that look like when you say scouted the player?
It's what you are thinking. It is a dark process. It is watching any video that exists on these players. It is reaching out to past coaches, to programs, finding out about their character, vetting them, understanding what their family situation is. So it's a pretty deep process, but we thought it was necessary because we were looking for specific players to kind of fit our roster. With Daniel and Ethan specifically, and Ethan, you have a very talented center back that naturally can play the 5 position, so the left center back position.
Is he left-footed?
He is.
We were pretty sure, especially after we posted that goal, but wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah, and the very funny thing is that we came out of the Atlanta United game where we just identified the trialists as trialists, and we got so much feedback from people. They wanted to know his name. They wanted to know who that guy that's dominating on the field, and we're like, just be patient, just be patient. So we were very happy to get him. He's also very experienced at this level. So what I told people is, from a cognitive, psychological performance perspective, think about that this young man trained with us for a week and then stepped in and started for us against Atlanta United and played 45 minutes of very top-level soccer. That is not common human thing to do, and that showed us a lot. Daniel also been on our radar. We have scouted him very deeply. I kind of addressed him as like a technical wizard in our press communications. He is technically a master. When you watch him play in the midfield, he is capable of doing whatever he wants with the ball. He is also a natural lefty,
which is never a bad thing.
Yeah, and especially in the midfield, and just like objectively, we think like 15 to 20% of players are only left-footed usually. So think about when you are defending a left footer, that's different than the majority of the players on the field. So that gives a different advantage to us, and we have multiple players that are naturally left-footed. Daniel, I think for us, gives us a lot of flexibility in the midfield, can play probably the 8 and 10 naturally without a problem. And I think the fans are going to enjoy what we have been seeing in training for the last couple of weeks with him. I think even just yesterday in training, he might have been the best player on the field.
That's awesome. Do you think he can play at the wing at all?
Yeah, I think he can, and I think one of the things, and I'm sure we're going to get there, but I think you're going to see a much more fluid team this year, a team that can move and play in different positions. We intentionally signed guys that we thought could play multiple positions, so you will see that. And I think Daniel, when you watch him play on the field, you naturally find him in the left channel a lot, so he travels all over. But I think he can play pretty much anywhere in the midfield and probably any of the wide forward positions as well.
Do you view those as wide forwards, or do you view those as wingers?
I view them depending on what the characteristics of the players are. So if a player naturally, I think, is more of a midfield type player, then I would probably refer to them as a wide midfielder. If I think they are more naturally a attacker and create that way, I usually refer to them as wide forward. So both, I would say. Yeah.
Because I think my favorite European team is Fiorentina, and the previous coach Vincenzo Italiano, he really believed, he was like, when people would ask him about wingers, he would correct them in press conferences repeatedly. He'd be like, they're wide forwards, their job is to score and create, but their first job is to score. They are forwards who play out wide.
Yes,
they may not have the same characteristics as a 9 or as a center forward or whatever. He's like, they are forwards. If we play a midfielder out there, we can talk about it, but they are not wingers. These are, in my system, these are forward. He was just he would like stop people and correct them, not being a jerk, but he was just very particular about his view.
And not to speak for Chris, obviously, but I think Chris would probably refer to those players mostly as wide forwards.
Gotcha. Cool.
Interesting. Well, we made 2 more signings after that podcast was released. Goalkeeper JP Philpott, a 22-year-old from Greenville, North Carolina. He spent 2 years at the University of North Carolina, and then went out to Spain for a little bit, Rayo Vallecano, and then CF Motril, which I think is in the 3rd division.
I'm sure you pronounce those perfectly.
Definitely perfectly. And then he signed as an emergency keeper with Birmingham Legion at the end of last season, and made the bench, but did not play 3 times. And then we also added a striker, Keegan Anselin, a 21-year-old from Jacksonville, Florida.
And he played in the end of the Atlanta United game, right?
Yes.
Credited with the assist. Anselin spent 4 years at West Florida University, playing for former CFC head coach and technical director Bill Elliott.
Shout out, Bill.
And Keegan had ended up with 37 goals and 9 assists in 70 matches, and 13 of those goals came in his senior season.
How do you, do you have anything to share about those 2 players? And how do you look at, our 3rd forward, essentially, that we've brought in that front line?
Yeah, I think I'll start with Keegan. I think Keegan presents a physical profile that is problematic. If you watch his college highlights, he is battering probably very high-level defenders.
Let's go.
And I think what we're trying to create is a very attacking team. Not saying that's how we will play at all times, but mentality-wise, we want to be a team that scores goals. If we go up, we do not want to become conservative. We want to make sure we put games away, and he gives us an option to go into a game. I think people saw briefly what he could do in the Atlanta United game, but what I tell people is think about that this player has trained with us again for a week, stepped in and played against one of the top teams in the United States and caused a lot of problems for them. And that probably for us was the final kind of, okay, we liked him, we're inclined to sign him, but having that type of performance for us for sure was probably the what made the deal happen.
I liked his back to goal and kind of touch and spin out. There was one where he did it inside the box, right at the top of the box, and the guy was guarding him.
Just barely poked it out.
Was able to shepherd things out, but also that guy was bought for like $3 million. and then another time he did it, and I'm pretty sure that's the foul that creates the free kick for the game winner.
Yeah, and I think likely in a competitive match that is a red card. So I think that probably would have been a red card in a normal game, but that moment I think for everybody showed what he is capable of doing in open space. He took a pretty creative touch, turned the defender, and then he's able to take it to the house from when he creates a little bit of space.
And that's a guy with 4 years of college experience, and he's still 21, will turn 22 next month.
Got to like that age profile.
Yeah.
So to get still inside baseball, I guess, that's this entire podcast. When you're looking at guys coming in training camp who are in there for a week and they're coming into Atlanta United, like, are you going like, we already mostly know and we just want to see some minutes? Do you decide on some guys beforehand, but you don't sign them until afterwards? Do you have to see them in a game because you haven't? Like, how do you think about that?
Individually treated. Truly, depending on the person, the player, how much we think we have seen what we need to see. There are some players that we go into the game, like Atlanta United or a preseason game, and need to see something that we haven't seen, and that could be the case with some of them. There are some that go into those games, and we're pretty confident as a staff that we are going to sign them. So unless probably things don't go horribly wrong in the game and they show like they cannot hang, then we probably will stay with our decision. So it's not dependent necessarily on game performance because there's so much work done behind the scenes. And when I was talking about the scouting that we do, there's a lot of evidence and kind of data that we have on all the players that we're scouting that we lean in that direction and not necessarily what our eyes are telling us, because we know very well as humans that memory is very bad. Memory is fluid. Same thing as coaching. Even a top coach, we probably retain 15-20% of what we're actually seeing in a game and training. So you cannot rely on that. You need evidence and data.
It's like what I always say, that soccer is truly played in the spreadsheets.
It's not what he says. I bet you have if you evaluated over 300 players, I bet you have the world's largest Google sheet.
It is a pretty insane document, but what I will say, it's a very collaborative one. So there's a lot of people working and helping to make sure that we get a view on these players. And a lot of the players probably have some kind of relationship with one of us at some point, or connected to someone that we trust that started the relationship, started the conversation.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, do you want to start us off a little soccer history and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so let's go back to the beginning, to little Sebastian. Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, where'd you grow up, your family life. Take us back to the very beginning.
Yeah, for sure. I think little Sebastian was a little bit of a menace, if I'm honest. And
and off the field?
On and off the field, yes. So I am 100% Colombian. I was born in Pamplona, Colombia, which is in the mountains and very close to the border with Venezuela. So all my family is Colombian. I came here to the United States when I was about 2 or 3. And I'm just very honest, I consider myself both Colombian and American. I've done all my education here in the United States and really grown up here. But I have deep connections to Colombia. And the reason we came over was really the drug violence in Colombia. There was a situation with my parents and family that was really tough to kind of deal with. And my parents made the decision that they didn't want myself or my brother kind of growing up there. So we came to the U.S. originally to Vermont, where my dad was studying, and then we moved to East Lansing, Michigan, where my dad got his doctorate in mathematics. And that was a very formative time for me, for sure, because I am a diehard Michigan State fan. I grew up on campus, so that for me was a very special time. And then after my dad graduated, we moved to Texas, where I spent a lot of time, and then really my education and professional career there. Corpus Christi, where I spent a lot of time, and I know we're probably gonna get to that at some point. And then did all my kind of like post-schooling in Texas. So my undergraduate degree in Texas, my master's in Texas, and then eventually my doctorate at the University of Texas.
What was your doctorate
Austin. My doctorate is generally in sport management, and my specialization is in elite athlete development.
And what was your goal when you were doing that? What did you want to do with that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And was it to force people to call you doctor? Because that's an acceptable reason.
Yes, I have that joke with my dad for the longest time. And the funny thing is, like, when you finally become a doctor, you hear it very little, and I really don't ask people to call me doctor ever unless I don't like you, and then for sure you're gonna call me doctor. And I really think it's part of kind of getting to certain places of your career and eventually leading to my position here at CFC. I was very lucky to be at the University of Texas, Austin, in the sport management program while I was there. We had probably 3 or 4 of the top minds, probably internationally, in sport development, sport management at the school. It was pretty much identified as the top graduate school at the time in sport management. And my advisor and the other professors basically let me design my own education. So I told them I was already coaching. I already knew I wanted to work in soccer 100%. If they would let me design my education around the development of elite soccer players. So they allowed me to do that, and I was very lucky that that happened. Very intense course load, 4 years of coursework in my doctorate, and then 3 years of dissertation. So it took me 7 years to complete my doctorate. But what I tell people, it changed everything for me. It changed the way I view the game. It changed the way I view people. It changed the way I operate as a coach, as a leader, in every way. And I think it was a very tough time, and me and my family, I always kind of say that I wouldn't have completed it without them.
What was the title of your dissertation?
My dissertation, first I wanted to write it on FIFA, the video game.
Oh,
Yes,
my
so
guy.
I wanted to.
I see what's going on here.
Yes, so I wanted to show that video games can be used as a form of development and play, and using a lot of play theory, because essentially you are learning while you are playing FIFA.
I didn't grow up playing soccer, and it's taught me a ton of like how to be
Yes.
move into space. Like it genuinely taught me so much.
And I tell people all the time, I also think it helped my understanding of soccer and like as I was learning the game. So that's what I initially tried to do as my dissertation.
And they were like, "Shut up, man! You can't do video games."
That's what eventually happened, but not because they didn't let me do video games. There wasn't enough research to rationalize why I wanted to study. The funny thing is, like 2 or 3 years later, a PhD student in Canada did it. Yeah, so I was like, eventually.
Sponsored by EA Sports Vancouver.
Yeah, eventually my dissertation is really what my specialization is. I'm going to use very nerdy language here, but what we call a holistic ecological approach, which is view things as environments, as systems. And I studied the Olympic youth development system in South Texas. So I studied it for about 2 or 3 years, understanding how the system worked, ODP in South Texas, which is a powerhouse area. What was working, what wasn't going well. Eventually, I got to present that information to the people that were working ODP, which I knew very well, and then eventually got to present a lot of that information to U.S. Soccer. And a lot of the stuff that came from my dissertation, again, lucky to be with people that are willing to make those changes. We made some of those changes in ODP.
Cool. So you got to see some of your stuff implemented too.
Yes, and that was very cool, and it's amazing. And a lot of people, I think, at that time were like, they didn't even know my degree existed. Now, what's happened in like sports science is an absolutely explosion of different disciplines, and now it's become much more common that professional coaches, youth soccer coaches, are very much have strong academic backgrounds in their disciplines.
So you were in Texas for that period of time. Is that when you were coaching Corpus Christi and all that kind of stuff?
Corpus Christi is a special place because my brother and myself, my brother works in soccer as well. We started, when I finished my doctorate, I was going to take a job likely in Spain, and my brother called me and was like, why don't we just do our own thing? So we started our own company, Giraldo Elite Football, and started it from ground zero in an area that had not really been known for its elite athlete development, especially in soccer. And in a period of 7 years, we started to develop and transition players to really high levels of soccer. And he was obviously a big part of that. And that led to eventually myself becoming the head coach of Corpus Christi FC.
How did you end up at Colorado Rapids?
I ended up at Colorado Rapids because Miguel, who I hired in San Antonio when I was the technical director of a club there, I hired him. We worked very closely. He left for the Rapids eventually at some point after that. And then they had a big opening, and he called me up And he's like, are you interested in this? They got me in, they interviewed me in, and I got in. Yeah. And I worked at the Rapids for 3 years and had kind of 3 different positions. The last one was I was the elite technical director. So I oversaw all of our elite youth programming, MLS Next on the boys, ECNL, on the girls. I was the head coach of the Rapids women's team. So I oversaw a very specific elite side of the youth club.
And that Miguel you referenced, that's Miguel Rodriguez.
That is Miguel Rodriguez, who
new-
is our new academy director. Yes.
So, okay, this is a question that we have, and we're jumping around here. Director of coaching and academy director is just the same thing, right? Or like,
Yeah, it's to make it clear for me, it's different in different spots. So different clubs. Usually, the person that is at the top of the academy is the academy director. So Miguel is the academy director, and he is the MLS Next director. And then like Juan, who oversees our girls pathway, he is our girls director of coaching.
okay.
Yes.
Interesting. But there have been titles in the past, like of just director of coaching, which seems to me to be synonymous in some cases with academy director.
Yes. Sometimes it is used that way. The way we have it structured, Miguel is MLS Next director and academy director.
Got it.
And then the leads of the pathways are the directors of coaching.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Cool. Interesting. How has the transition been for you? Actually, I'll come to that in a second. As a player growing up, what was your position and what kind of player were you?
Yes, I'm curious what you guys would take a stab at, that knowing that I am Colombian. What position do you think I played?
Oh, 10, flare midfielder or destroyer 8 that just studs up all the time. Those are my two.
Here's why I don't think it's a studs up midfielder. Because you referenced that tackle on Keegan to be a red card, and we all know it was clean. So
That's a good point. I'm about to make you all laugh very heavily. So I was definitely attacking center mid, and my brother was the destroyer 8.
Okay. Yeah,
and then
that
my
makes
dad, who played in Colombia at very high levels, was that center back that was trying to break your leg. And
Nice.
Yes, accumulated a ridiculous amount of red cards in his life. Yeah, but I was a center mid, and then just naturally, as what happens with your career as you get older, as you go on, I kind of dropped eventually and played like deeper, but attacking center mid pretty much my whole life.
What level did you stop playing at?
Yeah,
regularly?
I played very briefly professionally for a very short period of time, and then played a little bit of indoor professionally, which was a horrible experience for the type of player that I am.
like
You just got
in the MASL.
It was not. It was not. But I will tell you this, and people know this, if you have only really played outdoor and you grew up and developed outdoor, the indoor game with players that have played indoor for long periods of time, it is really wild. The angles that they know, how they hit the ball. So I did, but I knew during that time too that it probably wasn't going to be a long term, and I had already started my pathway like education wise. Yeah.
And coaching wise, I assume.
Yeah, I started coaching when I was 17. So I started coaching very young because my dad worked in the game and coached me and my brother a lot. So at that time, I didn't know I was going to be a coach. Like I knew I liked it, and I worked in coaching all the way through like graduate school, and that's always like been my job. But it was at the end of college when I was about to go to law school that I made the big kind of change, and I'm like, I don't think I want to go to law school. I don't really think I'm going to enjoy that. You know what I really like? Soccer. And that's when I made the determination to gear my full education to soccer.
Very cool. What number did you wear?
10.
Classic.
I just had a feeling.
Yeah, and I think you all will know who my favorite player of all time is.
James Rodriguez.
Close. The original 10 for Colombia, El Pibe, Valderrama.
Giant hair.
Yes, for sure.
Love that. Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. When you played professionally, you said it was brief. Did you play in the States?
Yes, I did. In Texas.
Yeah. Does that team still exist?
Yeah, they do not. They do not. And it was while I was getting my education too. So it was like playing, but really, like I said, I already knew that long term it probably wasn't going to be. And one of the things that was like a clear indicator was my ability to recover compared to some of the other guys it just wasn't the same. And being a smaller, smaller player, I took a big beating at the 10, and I started to, you start to see why certain people get to the levels that they play at. So I knew it was probably coming and enjoyed kind of playing those 2 years, but I knew that it wasn't going to be a long term.
Were you a player that needed more space?
Yes, definitely. And just, I would say the game here in the United States is probably not one that style wise fits the type of player that I am. Very physical, lots of confrontations. I am very creative, high possession. Yeah, so I think a lot of things, but in reality, just not as good as the players that transition to have long careers.
Are we going to find you playing random tournaments and random men's leagues around here?
Yeah, I played in our 5v5 like foundation tournament.
How was that?
And we lost in the final, unfortunately, which I did not play in because I picked up an injury in the semis. But it was fun. Yeah, for sure. And we had a pretty good squad. Yeah.
Okay. Are you one of those who is too competitive, or are you able to turn it down because you've been out long enough?
Those days are done, and maybe some people would disagree, but those days are done because I think I have a lot of more self-regulation and control now. But when we are playing, so for example, when CFC is playing, you will see that side of me come out for sure.
Yeah,
yes,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've asked Chris and Jeremy's our former CEO, on this podcast about playing and about whatever else, and both of them said a different version of the same thing, which is like, and I'm putting words in their mouth. I'm not trying to say this wrong, but like, I'm too competitive to continue playing. I'm never going to be who I once was. Therefore, I don't play anymore, is essentially what they said.
Yeah. One of the things, though, that I've taken very seriously is I do not play at a certain level anymore because I cannot afford an injury, because then it will inhibit my ability to do my daily job too much.
That makes sense.
So you get smarter, I'm hoping.
We all hope. We all hope we get smarter. What has the transition been like, moving from the academy to the, like, I guess, professional men's side and running the technical side for CFC?
Yeah, it's been violent is the best word that I would use. So there was a 2-month period there where I was doubling both as the academy director and in my role. So very, very long days, a lot of responsibility. But one of the reasons we wanted to wait and bring in a top person like Miguel was to make sure that we had the right person. So Miguel being in for about 5-6 weeks now, things have gotten much more normal. Have a person there that is fully autonomous and leading our academy. So I would say the last 2 months have kind of settled down, and the reality for me, in many ways, I would consider what I'm doing a dream job. But I also tell people that I have probably to this point had 2 or 3 jobs that at some point I thought were my dream jobs, and I didn't think I could progress further. And you think, okay, that's like my ultimate. But I would say the role that I do right now is pretty much a dream job. At some point, I thought if I could do that every day for a club like this, I would be a happy person. And that is where I am right now. I'm very happy and motivated in the role that I have.
How did you end up at CFC?
That is the craziest story that I don't think many people outside the office know. So I was obviously with the Rapids with no intention at all to leave my position there, and got a call from my brother who works in the state association. He's the director of coach education here for the state of Tennessee. Called me and basically was like, person at CFC reached out and they are in their academy director search. Not sure they think they have the right person. Are you interested to have a conversation with them? And back context is I've been trying to find a way to come to Tennessee because my parents live here.
Where are your parents?
They live in Rock Island, where they bought a 60-acre ranch and retired 4 years ago.
Good for them.
It's been my refuge for some time. So I've been trying to come and be closer to family. Them. It is just not that easy to find what I do professionally in certain spaces. That happened. They called me. They asked me if I was interested. A week later, I had a Colorado Rapids women's game. Colorado Storm at that time, because we moved into the USLW. Won that game, got on a red eye, came to Chattanooga, did interviews absolutely all day, and then flew back and continued my job. But I'll give a lot of credit to the leadership at that time. Before I left, they came to my hotel the morning and told me what was it going to take to get me here to Chattanooga. And I gave them exactly what it would take. Within 48 hours, they responded and matched that, and I accepted, and I think the rest is kind of history.
That's awesome.
It's a very cool story, for sure.
It's cool that like kind of I feel like fate aligned there. It's the area you wanted to be. There's not a lot of community oriented like clubs where you can have a big project, because a lot of times I don't know. There's just a lot of non-community, and that may not be like as important to you, but like I can tell that like for a lot of people that come here, like when we ask them why, one of the things is like, well, I wanted to be somewhere where soccer matters, and like because there are higher level places you could be, right? If you were helping run Inter Miami's academy, that would be more prestigious, without a doubt. At least if the first job you took, but like now being a technical director of Chattanooga Football Club, I feel like is a different type of challenge. And yeah, did you envision yourself? I know you said you thought it was a dream to do it, but did you envision yourself like someday they'll look for a technical director and they'll look to me? Like,
so I've been in technical director roles pretty much at the past. I'm getting old, so it's hard to remember. Pretty much at the last 4 or 5 clubs that I've been at. So I have been in one of the top like soccer positions. What I haven't really done before is the sporting director piece. Which that's what I consider all of that together, kind of like my dream. And I get to do that now, which is like the acquisitions of our first team staff, the acquisition of our players. But what I tell people is like, I do think my career was kind of building up to this point, and just like, I feel like I'm prepped. I think I have gotten here for a reason. So I think it happened like because it was supposed to. But it is a little unique that I got brought in to be the MLS Next Academy Director, and then within 2 months,
pretty quick,
transition to oversee our sporting operations.
Did they come tap you on the shoulder and ask you, or did you tap them on the shoulder and be like, hey, just if you're still looking?
It was an interesting, I think kind of both ways happened. I think part of it was them seeing day to day how I operate and what I can do. And then I think they knew my aspirations of what I wanted to do long term. So I think it just kind of worked out. They knew that's a role that I would want to be in. I think they thought I was good enough and gave me the opportunity. So I think it was both ways.
Nice. You've built some really good women's teams, did some homework on you. I did not do as much research on the men's teams you built, but those have all been amateur, correct?
Yes.
What's the biggest difference, besides the obvious, like you can pay players, like in building an amateur men's or women's team, building an amateur team versus building a pro team?
Yeah, I would say when you build the roster of a professional team, the margins are much smaller, which is you like a player, for example, a man that is extremely dominant physically at the USL2 level, D1, even like ACC, is not going to step into MLS Next Pro and be physically dominant. So you know that there is a level jump there. And pretty much I would say that is true for any amateur level that transitions to this level. So in that regard, you no longer can just watch a player and be like, they're going to come in and be effective. You need to do your homework because there's a lot of pieces connected to that.
How do you watch college then and see it transition to the pro? So Rod said, I think he said on this podcast, he definitely said to us privately, like, I have to see college guys. I have to see them in person before I sign them because I don't know if they're playing against road cones. I'm very much paraphrasing. I don't know if they're playing against road cones or they're playing against professional level players, and I need to see them. Like, how do you think of that challenge of evaluating college talent?
Yeah, it's hard. He's not wrong in some of those pieces. What I would say is if you watch the college game, the way it's played is much different than the professional game. And I actually watched a video the other day, I think, where someone explained it perfectly. In the professional game, there is the respect that if you get pressured with the ball, you are good enough to get yourself out of that situation. In college, and I'm talking about the highest tier college, D1, ACC, Pac-12, Big Ten, you still can just run at people and freak them out, and they're not going to be good enough cognitively or technically to execute. that is out the door in the professional game. So you can't just press and run at people and freak them out. And you even watch like the top college teams, like you watch North Carolina or you watch Wake Forest, they probably have 8 or 10 tough games a year. And then they are superior qualitatively player for player against any other team that they play. So I would say there's a lot of differences in the level of the pro game. And then big changes come in schedule, the demands, how often you have to perform. You no longer have the ability to be a high name player. You did well last year. That means you're in the mix. You got to perform every single day. And what I tell people from a human performance perspective, that's not natural. That is not a natural thing for humans to do. So you have to train. You got to have the psychological characteristics. So a lot of that falls on the individual, I would say. There are major differences when you look at a player that was successful in college and then the players that are in what we would call in research in the actual elite space, which is the professional game.
So we signed a D2 National Player of the Year in Peter.
Yes.
How do you evaluate and know that that's the guy that's either going to be leading your line or be among the candidates to lead your line? How do you make that judgment with him coming out of college?
One, the objective piece of the man has scored a ridiculous amount of goals.
I saw that.
Yes, and we've all worked with a lot of Division II men's players, and that is not easy. Those numbers are ludicrous numbers to put up. For example, I've had several players that played for me that went on to be professionals and in college were scoring 10 or 15 goals a season and were top players, had professional contracts. What Peter has done in college is truly special. And then you start to watch and start to see what he does. He scores in many different ways. He can control the game physically. He can control the game when we're out of possession as well. So I think there's the evidence in Peter, and then you start to watch and you start to see the level of defenders at MLS Next Pro. And I think we came to the conclusion that we think Peter can do what he did in D2 very similarly in MLS Next Pro.
Matthew has a theory that I think he took from somebody else, which is that and you said this on this last podcast, which I thought was interesting, and I'm curious your thought on it. He said, as you go on, it's difficult to continue to score more and more goals in college because you get more and more notoriety, and then defense is key on you, and then no matter who you're playing, you're now the game plan. Do you think that's accurate? And is it important to see a guy progress, not just in age, but to continue racking up those numbers year after year?
Yeah, 100% that is accurate. So you look at people, and it even happened in my career too, breakout season junior year, and then senior year not as explosive numbers wise, and a lot of that has to do because people have adapted, they game plan. So that's 100% true. One of the things that becomes really crazy is when players in college are scoring goals or assisting, and then they get in professional environments, and that stuff for some of them goes to zero. They cannot score anymore at all. They cannot create, and that's just natural. That's but you do see that very commonly. So the jump in many ways, not only with the soccer, but psychologically is difficult. There's a lot of things that make the game much harder at the professional level.
How do you look at a guy coming out that's 25 versus 21?
It's our approach overall philosophically is obviously look at the players individually, but just naturally a player that's 25. So normally at 28 is when we think players are peaking in soccer. Mm-hmm. So a 25-year-old we know likely has not peaked, but you also know they have less years on the back end where they could potentially perform. A 21-year-old, for example, if they have a breakout season, then that shows us, okay, not necessarily maybe they can do this for long term at this, but likely showing you what their ceiling could be. So you probably more resources, you're willing to take more risks with that player. But one of the things that at least I think always is when you watch a player play and they show the highest level they've showed ever, that is likely an indication of their ceiling. That doesn't mean that's how they're going to play every game. So you need to be careful, but the potential is there. So if they get in the right environment, under the right training, right coaches, they could become very consistent at that high level.
Because I was thinking Keegan's 21 essentially.
Yep.
You have Peter who's 25. obviously Marcus is who he is. He's already the player he's going to be. But like I was just thinking, these are two players coming out of the same, I mean, different ages, 4 years difference in the same almost situation.
Along those lines, Next Pro is a fairly young league. Although the average age is up to like 21, probably stick around there this time around. And I'm curious, like, there are going to be some more independent teams coming in future years.
Knock on wood.
There are, not even rumors. I think it's been kind of out loud said, if we get it to the right nexus of teams, like probably look at a Division II and a Division III split. I have this theory that you do not need to comment on, that MLS is moving towards taking kind of everything in soccer underneath its wings long term, which means some sort of absorption or buyout or complete murder of the other professional men's leagues in this country in the lower divisions. So like right now, we have, outside of Darwin Ortiz, special example, everyone under contract currently is on a 1-year deal, no option, or a 1-year deal with a 1-year club option, or they are on their club option right now. So how do you view roster building kind of in that context with, like, these are mostly short-term decisions that we're making, but as this club grows and as soccer in this country changes and professionalizes even further, like, when do you think we might start seeing a little bit more of a kind of longer term contracts made? The age profile of our team, which has come down slightly from last year at this point in time, like, how do you start seeing like the long term future of the professional roster?
Yeah, there's
Toby loves you.
Yeah. Hi. That's actually a very good question. So one of the realities is in MLS Next Pro, a lot of our players are hoping, obviously, for a jump transition to the next level, whatever that might be for them, MLS, overseas, etc. So part of the shorter term contracts that you see is to answer that, which is our players don't necessarily want to commit for 3 to 5 years because
give them a way out.
Exactly. Give them a way out. And we also, like, philosophically, the way we want to operate is we want to in some way address the individual needs and desires of the players that are with us. So you see that. Then there's some other like pieces that come into play. It is riskier to do longer term contracts because development is nonlinear. So you do not know necessarily what's going to happen. And I say this all the time with my staff everywhere that I am. We are very bad at predicting long-term sport development. So NFL, all these organizations that spend millions, billions of dollars trying to identify who they're going to pick in the draft or whatever, they get it wrong all the time. So knowing that we less risky here because we don't have that huge margin for error. So a lot of reasons why the contracts are shorter. I do think what you said, though, I think eventually you might see a shift in what the system looks like, and this level might demand longer contracts.
I think we've kind of seen that with the USL Championship at this point, where a lot of those players in that league now they know they're never making MLS. They're never making a senior roster spot. And they're fine with that. And that's great for them. Like they're good players at a good level. And is that why you kind of see like a lot of championship teams saying, you know what, here's a 2+1, not usually 3-year deals, but like, maybe a Louisville's offering you a 3-year deal because like they are a well-run team with a plan. It's like,
they're different clubs obviously operate a little bit differently, but one of the trends that you're seeing in USL Championship is it's a little bit of an older league. It's like you're saying, and one of the beauties that we have in MLS Next Pro is, I think there was a study that came out very recently, but MLS Next Pro is the most scouted men's league in the United States because of the youth of the league, because of the talent that we see. We're obviously in a little bit different situation as an independent club with our roster, but we also will head fully in the direction where we'll probably have some very young players mixed with some of our experience. I think right now we're like in between that world of adapting. We got a little younger, but I think as you go forward, and especially as our MLS Next Academy develops, hopefully we have 4 or 5 players from our academy with our first team every single year, and we have that pipeline.
Do you think it's realistic in a market this size to be able to turn out 4 or 5 players, or do we have to recruit in players to be able to be like guys that can perform at least well enough in practice to, I mean, we've talked about on this podcast with coaches that are like, look, I love having academy guys. They have to be able to be mature enough and like as men, and then they have to be able to hang obviously technically. But like, are we going to be able to produce that many? And if we can't, like, how do we, I guess?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is you have to improve the environments that the players are in every day. And I say this very respectfully from just like a development, education, learning, teaching perspective. The players are not at fault. It is the environments that they're in. So as we improve the environments in Chattanooga, we have better coaches, more top-level coaches. What's going to happen with the player pool is the foundation of the player pool will raise. That will take some time. I think in the end, though, our goal will always be to have probably 3 to 5 athletes from our academy training with our MLS Next Pro team, and then probably signed on that team at least 2 to 3 players that came from our academy. And I would say that's pretty sustainable long term. In terms of we want to win championships, I think it will always take a mix of doing both really well, recruiting externally and then having the pipeline internally that's helping us out.
You shared something before the podcast. What's the number of A licenses in the academy now?
Yeah, so we just had like an explosion for sure, but I think by the summer of 2025, we will have 6 A licensed coaches in the academy.
How many would you like to see in an ideal world?
It's not necessarily license dependent, but I do think we need to get to the point in the academy where you probably have 15 to 20 top coaches. And it's not saying that we don't have those people there right now, but when I'm talking about people that probably have experienced different contexts, have worked in different countries, and have a little bit more holistic view of development and players. But I will say that our academy probably in 6-7 months is in a very healthy place because, again, talking about the environments players in, we have improved our coaching staff tremendously. We've improved our structure processes that will relate to the development that's happening with the players.
And listeners to this podcast will know that like the academy is now underneath the first team in a way that it was not prior to now. So there's a ton of changes that you can talk about now without it being negative necessarily towards the past. Like I think people understand that this just it's a new horizon. There's a lot more investment in, and there's also like it's not just an agreement of a bunch of teams to play with CFC uniforms, which was cool and like a good first step. But
and
now
also
it's
made sense back then.
Totally. But now it's just we're in a different like things progress and things change in mostly good ways, hopefully. And like it's just a new chapter for the academy.
Yeah, and one of the things I say all the time is while the academy is introducing a very elite performance pathway, the academy will always answer. The large portion of the academy will be grassroots. It will be a place where hopefully we can find a home for any family or player that wants to play at any level. The introduction of the elite pathways will improve, though, the grassroots pathways, because as you raise the standards here and have resources, the benefactor is usually the more grassroots academy. And that's already happened with the introduction of a director of performance analysis in the academy, our new like technology that we purchased. So that stuff is well in motion.
You were over the academy until very recently. How hard is it for you not to be looking over Miguel's shoulder all the time?
It's perfectly okay, and he has been a relief because of doing double duty was a really hard time, and then just bringing in someone like Miguel that I can trust fully and I know can do the role. He can do that role very autonomously, and we work hand in hand every single day. So the beauty of what I do now in my role is I obviously have a piece in all of our soccer programming, so I'm very directly working with all the leads.
Something you've done really, really successfully in the past as well is build a really good women's program. In particular, I guess the USLW League. Were they in the WPSL before that?
We were.
How do you build a successful WPSL team?
Yeah, so first I would start with the development of women in soccer, both athletes, coaches, and girls is a huge part of my why. So I have devoted significant part of my career working with girls and women, both kind of like in the elite youth spaces and in the higher spaces, and working with a lot of professional women privately in small group training. So that's a big part of my why and one of the reasons that I was eventually in those roles. Building a successful women's team in that context, which is, amateur still, but really high level, requires a 12-month process, requires that you are scouting, you are recruiting for pretty much the full calendar year, that you have connections throughout the country and internationally where people trust the program, trust that players are going to come in for 3 months and get absolutely top notch. The beauty, I think, with the staff now, with the appointment of Juan as the head coach and Marin as the associate head coach, is I have full trust that we are about to change the game in what has been happening with the women. And obviously myself, I am directly working with them on, there's a lot of things that you learn doing it, a lot of nuances, and I have been absolutely transparent in sharing every piece of that information here. And then Marin was the first assistant of the WPSL team my second year with the Rapids women, and then the first assistant with the USLW Colorado Storm team as well. So she is very well versed in what it takes to be one of the top programs in the country.
Awesome. In recruiting, how do you go about? Is it just a bunch of college coaches? Do you just point at the past and be like, this is what we did in the past? Like how do those conversations start with? Because I assume, and this could be wrong, that it's first the college coaches saying like, hey, you have an opportunity, you should go here, and then it's of course convincing the player and the family and whatever else. But first of all, I guess, is that right? And if that's right, like how do you approach?
Yeah, there's there's kind of like you have a lot of tentacles out and do it in a lot of different ways. Definitely the college coaches is one of the routes, and just when you work in the game, as long as our staff has, you yourself also have deep connections with players all around the country or internationally. So college game for sure, one of our biggest places that we recruit. We also have several top academy girls players that will be a part of the team, whether they're fully rostered or whether they're training. And then the scouting process, not too different to what I talked about with the MLS Next Pro. A lot of video watching, a lot of reaching out and vetting the players. And one of the beauties and happened in Colorado is once you establish yourself as one of the top programs in the country and have that amount of success on the field, the recruiting and the scouting gets easier and easier. And it actually gets to the point, and we reached this in Colorado, we didn't have need for tryouts. We really didn't have any need for what you would consider normal scouting. It was all coming.
Everyone's calling you.
It was coming this way. And I do think that here you give us like a year or two, and I think a very similar thing will happen here, which is the recruitment really is going to start to happen this way. Players, coaches want their athletes to come play with us.
I absolutely love that.
Let's take a break from
Let's do it.
from business.
Talk about our true love and passion, food.
Yes.
That is also one of my deep passions.
So, okay.
Why are Colombian empanadas better than Argentinian empanadas?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay, let's just start there.
I need to bring y'all some of my mom's Colombian empanadas because you will 100% agree with that. I don't know. They're just different. So they're just a little bit different in how we make them. But you also have to understand that empanadas, both in Argentina and in Colombia, are different on the region that you're in. So they change, just like tacos or anything like that, like burgers. Same thing with empanadas. Like it's slightly different. The best empanadas, I always tell people, are my mom's. Like for me, it's like absolutely no question about it. She makes the best.
I love that. I have. I assume you've met Herman.
Yes.
So obviously, that's an Argentinian and a Colombian that are married, which is beautiful and wonderful and hilarious because they. But you know, that's just a family argument. But I'm in another group chat with a Colombian and an Argentinian, completely unrelated, and we are constantly pitting them against each other about empanadas, constantly, and it is a never-ending war. It is like just a cultural war across like. Yeah, it's
the
beautiful.
beauty is you don't have to choose. You can eat all of them if you want.
Yeah, I can. I don't know if you can. You might get disowned.
What's your most controversial food take?
That's a good question.
We'll give you example. Breezy's going to give you an example to like get your brain flowing.
Yeah.
So I like mayo on hot dogs. Unapologetically, I think mayo is good in almost all circumstances, but I like mayo on hot dogs, which is heresy for many people, including Matthew. I don't know if that's my most controversial, but that's up there.
And like one of mine would be that I don't think French fries need something to dip them in.
That's a good one.
If your French fries are not good enough to just eat, don't serve me those French fries.
That's a good one. I think I have one that I get attacked about.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I consider shrimp to be the cockroaches of the sea.
My man.
So I do not eat shrimp. And this is really weird. I'm a big sushi lover, but I normally do not eat seafood, but I do love sushi. So the only way I'm eating shrimp or I'm eating some of that seafood is if it's in sushi.
If it's covered in rice and seaweed.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I do get attacked by that for that shrimp take often.
I love it. Yeah, no, we're here for all the English boys are like, well, we can't say beans and toast. And we're like, no, you can. It's trash.
Are you a good cook?
No, but I am an amazing assessor of the quality of cooking and the food itself.
My man.
Okay.
If you have to cook something, what is your go-to to impress someone?
Zero. I have absolutely nothing that I'm trying to impress people culinary-wise. What I would maybe make
You don't make a mean frozen pizza?
No. Yes, I have made a lot of frozen pizza. I think I could make a good pizza for sure, a homemade one. Trying to think. I can probably make a pretty good mac and cheese because I'm just going to copy my mom's recipe.
No shame?
Yeah, no shame there. With a little bacon, a little bit of fresh vegetables. Yeah. But I will be very honest that I have almost no skills in the kitchen.
Okay. If you've had a long day and maybe somebody else is cooking, like
Hypothetically.
we may not ask you to make something here, or like you want to go out and get something. What's your go-to comfort dish?
Yeah, there's a couple that are probably empanadas, depending on where I am. Probably in a bigger city, you have access to Colombian food. Steak, burgers, and I do consider myself a pizza connoisseur. I have eaten a lot of top pizza, and one of the things you get to do in soccer when you work at this level is travel a lot.
Is eat a lot of pizza.
So yeah, you do
A lot of post-game pizza?
But making sure that, and me and my brother really started this together, is when we travel to cities, we already have identified a couple restaurants that we want to eat at that are top, and make sure that we go there for sure. But yeah, I would say pizza, steak, empanadas, probably my favorite foods.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite pizza joint in Chattanooga so far?
I've tried a couple that have been pretty good. Fiamma's, I think, is good and has been consistent. I like Pizza Bros. I think they make a good pepperoni like pizza, but I am welcome for all recommendations regarding food.
What part of town do you live in?
I live straight somewhere downtown.
So are you on this
south?
side? Are you on my side of the river, or where we are now, or are you on the other side of the river?
I'm geographically challenged still, but very central in the mix of downtown Chattanooga.
So you should try Southside Pizza on Main Street.
Okay. Have not been there.
It's worth going to.
Yeah.
Mick's just in and out right now. He is not staying put.
That would be the next pizza spot for you to try.
And community pie.
I've had community pie, and I agree, it's pretty good.
Community pie is not my favorite, but it is very consistent and solid. Like I will always go to community pie. I will never complain about community pie. But Southside Pizza is my favorite.
Okay, I need to go there because I have not been there, so that will be my next
And
try.
they are big CFC fans.
Okay,
as well.
perfect.
You mentioned burgers.
Yes.
What is your ideal burger?
Yeah, ideal, very traditional. I would say top meat, however, whatever it is, good bun,
Cheese,
cheddar
or no
cheese, mustard, and maybe like onions or some vegetables, but like very plain.
No tomato or lettuce.
And that really comes from a lot of just bad experiences with lettuce and tomato. But really plain and just letting the meat and the bun do the talking.
Okay.
Yep. Tremont's got the burger that people love.
That's what Davis told me. So that was Davis's recommendation. So I have not been there, but I will.
It's up there. Main Street Meats has a really good burger.
Okay. Been there.
I had the first time I had it was life changing. The second time I had it, it was still good, but didn't live up to the first time. But those are two that are like pretty universally loved here. And I'd be interested when you decide what your favorite burger is in town.
Yeah,
I'd be interested to hear
I
what
need to
it
go
is.
to Tremont because that's been recommended from a couple different people.
It's worth it. Okay, you mentioned steak. This one's a bit of a big question on this show. How do you like your steak?
Medium.
Okay, safe answer.
As long as you don't say well done.
Not at all. I did go through a period of time as a youth where I refused to eat meat that was not well done because I was freaking out about what would happen. But definitely, I think it needs to be like medium, probably at most.
Yeah, totally fair. I think anything up to medium is fine.
Yeah.
Anything
Yeah.
medium well or well, I want to know why. We actually made a lot of fun of Gene last year because he's like, no, it's an Islands thing. It's an Islands thing. And then we started asking like different players, and turns out it is an Islands thing. They want their meat well done. If you come from the islands, oftentimes culturally you want your meat well done. And I was like, huh. Because we asked Richard Dixon, we asked a bunch of different people.
Yeah.
That might be the result of negative experiences regarding meat. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Almost
to be fair,
certainly.
if you get food poisoning because someone didn't cook your meat well enough or left it out or whatever happened, like it doesn't take long before you're like never again.
Yeah.
Do you ever? Actually, let's start with the morning first before we get to the evening drink. Are you a coffee person?
Yes, addicted for sure. True Colombian.
How many cups a day do you drink?
I don't drink many a day. It's more the power and strength of what I do drink. So, and everyone laughs about this that I work with. If I'm and I have a tough long day, I usually go some kind of vanilla latte with 5 shots. Yes, if it's a much more just regular day, we're going 4 shots. But the best coffee by far is my dad's, who just makes normal like a pot of coffee, but the taste and the strength of it is like perfect. You just need one.
Wow.
What is Colombian coffee like?
It's the best, obviously.
I've had like Colombian coffee here, right? But like, what's real Colombian coffee like?
I'll explain it in what my dad does anywhere we go. So anywhere we usually go to eat, my dad orders a cup of coffee, and we try to deter him from doing that because it never turns out
Because
well.
it's 9:00 at night.
Yeah, so it's like we go out, my dad orders a cup of coffee, and then he's disappointed in the taste and the strength of the coffee. So Colombians, I would say, are very tuned in where they got to make sure the coffee is both strong, but that the flavor is also very good. And I would say that I think most places that you go get coffee, it's like usually one or the other. It doesn't have both. A Colombian is very quick to point out something is missing here. So we're a little bit snobbish in regard to our coffee.
You sound like Italians and wine. You take any Italian to somewhere, you give them wine, and they're either like, "Oh, this is very good. I'm surprised," or "This is the worst thing I've ever had." It is almost never in between.
What's the cup of coffee where do you get your coffee?
Yeah, I'm a big Starbucks person because I think the consistency is good. But I've had a lot of good coffee here. It's just like ease, I think, sometimes of Starbucks, how easy they make it for us.
No, I get it.
What about like when you're at home? Like, do you make coffee at home?
Yeah, I do. Usually like Keurig machine or something like that. But that's not the one that I truly need. That's the one that sets me up for the right coffee that will lead to performance.
He's got. I'll just let Breezy tell this.
Matthew says he needs 1 cup of coffee to find the light switch, and then the next 4 is for the rest of his day.
Good. Yeah, I call that first one, if I have it, the pre, and then there's the main event. Yeah, this is like people always... I did not start drinking, so a bad Colombian for a very long time. I did not start drinking coffee till my doctorate.
Okay.
So
No wonder your doctorate went so well. You locked in.
And eventually I got to the point that I was like, I probably need to stop drinking so many energy drinks because I'm probably going to have a heart attack. And I made the transition to coffee. And ever since, yeah, I've stayed with coffee.
So do you get an afternoon coffee or do you just sip on that?
I usually just get one a day.
Wow.
Matthew, what are you down to? Matthew's been trying to reduce his coffee consumption because he was in the, I'll have literally 4 cups in the morning, and then whatever in the afternoon.
Yeah, I'm really down to, I guess it's between 20 and 30 ounces, the 4 to 6 cups on the Mr. Coffee.
That doesn't sound
There's not that many
too
anymore.
bad. Yeah, let's enable each other. That doesn't sound bad at all.
I was
Two
probably...
coffee addicts over here.
I was probably, 50, 60 ounces for a while.
I would suggest go less and go powerful.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't want to get you down this route, but maybe go the 5-shot route and just take care of business one time a day.
So going down to 20 to 30 ounces, I've also tried to like make sure that it's strong enough to get me through. And it's been pretty consistent. Like we're in good shape. It was a problem when, one of the reasons was health. One of the other reasons was it's really hard once that coffee machine turns on, if it automatically like stops warming the thing, like you got to drink it all before it goes cold. And there's just a threshold there that is really hard to get past. And it was about 35 ounces or so.
And coffee, just like food, is dependent on the quality of
Yeah.
the actual coffee or food itself. So I think that's where my dad is very smart. They purchase really good coffee to make.
It makes sense. Does he grind his own?
He does, yeah.
So he's buying whole bean and taking care of it that way.
Yeah,
making
at
sure.
one point we had this like really fancy, expensive like espresso machine, but the problem is every time you use it in the home, you got to like clean it. So he was making like 1 espresso and then having to clean this whole machine. Oh, yeah. That was a great time, but very tedious for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, just go back to brewing a pot. It's almost as good. Go out for your espresso where professionals make it. That's how I always do things.
So let's turn from morning coffee or, afternoon coffee. Do you drink any booze?
I drink very little. And if I do drink, it is a very tropical, some kind of mojito or some kind of mixed beverage for sure. Very little beer, but just generally very little.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after a win.
Yeah. Oh, I have the answer for this. I have my celebratory drink.
What is that?
It is some kind of this past year. It was a blackberry mojito. So anytime I was building up to a big game or something, I would always tell the team, if we win, I will send you all a picture of the blackberry mojito.
Nice. And
very lucky that the summer we had with the Colorado Storm women, there was a couple of mojito nights there for sure.
So we need to make sure if Naked River opens back up and is able to do our post games, like we got to make sure they've got a little blackberry essence or something to add to their mojitos.
Yeah, I think after the Atlanta United game, I had some kind of mixed beverage for sure.
Excellent.
To celebrate.
that was a good one. What would you have been happy with? obviously winning was the best, but what 3-0 loss, 4-0 loss, just a 0-0 at halftime, then who cares what the trialists do? Like what would you have signed on for but pregame?
You all, I think, will learn me. There's only one result that truly makes me happy, and that's what happened. Anything beside that result, I would not have been happy. I think some kind of tie probably would have been maybe also fair for the game. I think it was a tight affair.
Way tighter than it should have been if you look at just the names on the paper.
Yeah, but winning is the only... Yeah, I'm a little bit sick in that regard for sure.
Now, buddy, welcome to the crowd. You're in the right room for that.
I will say our pregame history, or I'm sorry, preseason history with MLS is kind of good, at least in terms of like in games that happen in front of fans. Like we
lost to Atlanta United once heavily 4-0 that very first year where they were really good, and then after that
2 draws,
yeah,
and a win.
2 draws. So we are.
I'm not counting that game behind closed doors.
No, it doesn't count.
Didn't
We're
they beat us in
1-2-1.
an Open Cup?
Yes,
yeah.
Preseason only. Preseason only. No, they murdered us in the Open Cup.
I was going to make a joke about
Now, to be fair, that
last year's Open Cup was also preseason, but that's not
Shut up, Matthew. Open Cup didn't happen last year. I would also argue that game that was 6-0 was more of a 3-0 game. They were the better team. We were never in it. But like,
also our goal was good. That was called back.
Yes,
that was a good goal.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of questions about the Atlanta United game, tons. And one of the things I tell people is like, zoom out a little bit and think about, right, that our athletes, our staff was able to beat an MLS team no matter what, whether we are switching the second half and playing trialists, whether we have a mix of players or not. That is the full Atlanta United squad with trialists that are trying for their team. And what you're seeing is what has happened in soccer here is the levels have gotten much tighter. The difference between what you see there and what you see here is not too far off. And then I would say the big difference is then there are those couple players like Miggy who's coming on for them that are the game changers. But in reality, a lot of our athletes have developed with those players. They've played with them. A lot of our staff has worked with those players and helped develop them. So I would say what's changed is there's no fear. There is a clear understanding that the levels are close. And then on that day, objectively, in terms of soccer, we were the better team.
So I was taking a drink there. Something that Matt and Jim and I discussed last time we were here, it was just the post game or the game recap rather, was what are we supposed to think about the Atlanta United game? So when you're looking back at it and you're evaluating technical wise, not just as a technical director, but as like a soccer technical wise, like when you're looking at it and you're going, on the field, this and this happened. How do you think about it? Do you think about it as a game of two halves, which is kind of what we came down on, is like, hey, the first half is most of our starters, not all our starters, but like it's a lot more starters. Second half is trialists. First half, it's probably something we're trying to do. Second half, it's like just cross your heart and go for it. Like that's how we kind of came down. But how do you think about it? How do you look at it? Like what do how do you think about it?
Yeah, much differently than that, which I think is good for people to hear, which is what we're looking for in the Atlanta United game, very similar to what we'll look for in the Legion game this Saturday, which is implementation of what we've been working on. So essentially the game model, the principles, are the players actually translating the learning from training, video analysis on the field? That by far is the most important piece that we're looking at. The hard part of that is the score lines still matter. We are competing, like there's trialists in play. So I would say for the rostered signed team, a little bit differently how we look at them. And then the trialists, we look at them a little bit differently. But logically, and the way we view soccer, Chris does the same way, the game is about winning and scoring goals and preventing the opposition from doing that. So in regard to that, that's always the goal. And then that changes how much emphasis we put on that. But the difference is once we go into the regular season, there is only one goal in games. That's it. It is, we want to implement our game model. We want guys to be learning, but it's about winning.
Yeah.
Love that. Matthew, we didn't have any listener questions, right?
No listener questions because we did not really publicize very quickly.
I have another food question.
Yeah.
What is your fast food guilty pleasure move?
Yeah, that's a very easy question, actually. So I was just talking today with someone. I think there's plans that they're going to build a Whataburger here in Chattanooga soon, coming from Texas and living in Corpus Christi, which is the home of Whataburger. And we actually have a 2-story Whataburger there downtown.
No way.
Yeah.
It sounds like heaven.
Yeah, it's a crazy place. That is probably my guilty pleasure of fast food. Yeah.
There's one in Scottsboro. So every time, in fact, yeah, anytime I'm in Alabama, pretty much, end up going through Scottsboro. Not 100%, but pretty close. And like that is where I make sure to stop.
Yeah.
We've got some miscellaneous questions to close out our time. What's your favorite way to spend an off day? I realize you don't get a lot of those.
Yeah, I would say definitely with the people I love. So my family and a couple of other people in my personal life that are very important. That probably is my one big break. And my parents owning a very big ranch that's not too far away provides a space for refuge that I like to go. So anytime I probably have time off, I'm probably spending it with my family. And if I'm not spending it with my family, probably traveling.
Are you a turn your phone off kind of guy if you're having an actual day off where you're supposed to be off?
That's a terrible question to ask me. The answer to that is it does not go off very often because of the role that I'm in and what I do. Probably need to be a lot better at that. So like area of growth, I would say.
I feel like that's hard for everybody.
Yeah.
It's hard. I struggle with that, and I'm not near as... there's not near as many people reporting to me, right? It's just me. So like I really struggle to turn my phone off.
I have started to do something that is very healthy. I usually when I have off days, I do not wear my watch. So I don't get any of my texts. I don't get any of my emails. I lose the ability to like just always be connected. And if I am on an off day, I usually have my phone most of the time like face down.
How do you get your steps in?
That's a good question.
Do you run?
I don't run that much. I prefer to only run after the soccer ball.
Same.
But I do work out pretty much every day. Yeah.
I was going to ask if you have a fitness regimen to keep you sane.
Yeah.
What is it? Weightlifting at the gym? Is it cardio at the gym?
It's a mix of both. I would say weightlifting weekly for sure, a couple days a week, mobility stuff. Yeah. What I don't do very much is running. If I am going to run, it's usually I'm playing soccer of some sort.
Yeah, totally fair. What's something you want to, we're in the middle of February, I guess, or just the beginning of February now, but do you have a New Year's resolution, a new goal for the year, or something you're working on?
Yeah, it's probably something that's both part of like my professional and personal development, which is a little bit more balance between my work and personal life. That was hard in this transition period, but is something that I take very seriously and probably something that I need to improve dramatically in.
What's your favorite non-soccer sport?
I am a huge lover of sport, so I do watch a lot of all kinds of sport. I am addicted to soccer. So I watch soccer, all levels, all countries.
Who's your team? We didn't ask you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do not have one. Smart man. Yeah. The only team that makes me lose like my objectivity is the Colombian national team. When the Colombian national team plays,
get that logic out of here.
Yeah, let's move. The ref has not been good. They missed a lot of calls. Yeah, for sure. We've been very lucky though, because the Colombian national team, both men and women, have been very good. Yes, and improving. So I don't have really a club team that. Yeah,
better for your mental health, my friend.
Do you have a club team that you watch from like a philosophical, tactical point of view?
Yeah, several. I would say a fan of several Italian clubs and what's happening over there. I would say Brentford in the Premier League is doing a lot of interesting.
They're fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things. I think one of the beauties of just being addicted to soccer is I watch a lot of South American soccer. I watch a lot of American soccer. I watch a lot of Asian soccer, a lot of European, a lot of African. And what you do is you start to pick pieces that you're like, okay, I like this. This fits my philosophy. And you kind of pull it into what you do. So I really like soccer from all over. But in terms of how I like it played, I would say very Latin.
what is your footballing philosophy, your soccer philosophy?
Yeah, I 100% think the game needs to be adapted to the players that are on the team. So I would say a style that capitalizes on the individual qualities of the people on the team. Ideally, if I'm building my own team, and I'm talking about if I'm the head coach, because that's a little bit different for everybody, it is probably a highly technical team. Lots of speed, lots of fluidity between positions. I want to have the ball, but don't necessarily have to have it. And one thing for sure, and you'll see this probably if you've looked at what my teams have done, score and try to score a lot of goals. In that regard, I want to win games by scoring goals. And if we win 4-2, I'm probably happier than if we won 1-0 because scoring goals is difficult. And I want to be a team that when people jump on the field with us, they are nervous that we can explode in any moment and score 2 or 3 goals and end the game. So very attacking soccer, but one that is very much based on the quality of the players that are on the team.
Do you have a preferred formation?
It played a lot of different systems. In the attack, probably variations of 4-3-3. In the last couple of years, have become a big fan of playing in 3-6-1 with some of my teams. And then defensively, I would say, yeah, potentially a box in the midfield or a diamond in the midfield.
Like a trapezoid?
Yeah. And then the beauty of playing a 3-6-1 is that you have players running out of spaces into all kinds of forward spaces, and you don't know who's coming. So that's something recently that I've done with some of my teams. With the women's teams, we had some variations. On defense, though, I would say variations of 4-3-3, 4-5-1, 4-3-3, 4-4-2 at times. Ideally, pressing the absolutely brains out of the opposition, but at times
you have to have the right qualities for the players.
Have to adapt.
You've spent a lot of time in Texas, so that becomes untenable at a certain point.
Yeah, that is true. But also down my footballing philosophy, teaching players how to learn how to capitalize on their individual qualities. I think you're going to see that at CFC in the fact that me and Chris match up really well with how we view kind of the game. And I think that will allow players to express themselves better on the field because in the end, the game only belongs to the players. I fully believe that. I do not think it's our job as coaches to tell them how to play, how to solve problems. Our job is to structure the team, organize, make sure everybody's on the same page. But when it's go time, the game is extremely fluid and you need players to be allowed to do that.
All right, let's ask the last question here. We want to be respectful of your time, and you've got a thing coming up here in a minute. What has been, in the last year or so, what has been the best purchase that you have made that's under $100?
Oh, that is such a good question. Last year purchase under $100. I'm trying to think, but I would say probably, and this goes down, I didn't share this because it didn't come to my mind, but one of the things I do when I'm in off time, I do play video games if I have time. So I would say one of the best purchases, I played the Harry Potter game. Nice. And for me, big Harry Potter fan, but what it did is disconnects me in ways.
Yeah.
But it goes down how I view play, and I think adults should play because I think it's important to our free time, to our learning. So I think that was probably one of my best purchases last year, which it gave me a lot of time to disconnect and have leisure time and really enjoyable. Probably one of the best video games I think I've ever played. And have played video games pretty much my whole life.
Okay, I love the horsey game for that. Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yes, I also played that game. Very very quality game for sure.
Just get in there and you can lock in, do whatever you want.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. Well,
all right, I'll take us out. Well, listeners, viewers, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Sebastian, thank you for joining us. Excuse me. It means a lot that you're accessible to people like us, to the fans, to the community. And so thank you, and thank you for guiding our club. If you are listening and watching this, there are preseason games coming up. Get there. The season's about to be here. We'll see you later. Peace.